I wanted to make a video about something that has been on my mind lately. And this is a topic that inevitably, if you start talking about it, there's all sorts of hot water that you can get into and contradictions and paradoxes and ironies that are abound when talking about this, and it's just an inherently difficult thing to talk about, but I think it's a very important one and one that has been on my mind and something that I've been talking to a lot of people about and thinking about, and some recent events have made it very salient in my mind, and that is the topic of masculinity and what it means, or what it ought to mean, what is an aspirational view of what being a man could be. And I think there's a strain of, excuse me, a strain of masculinity that, and it's very obvious allusions with what it's this kind of sphere of um men, the red pill men, and that having obvious allusions to the Matrix and connections to Plato's cave that I want to talk about, because I think there are a lot of men today that see a culture bereft in um, idolatry of the wrong things and of um, senselessness, and a culture that has lost its way, and a culture that has also left a lot of these men behind um, through various social, cultural, technological changes and shifts that have left, and I won't go into those, but I'm sure many of you who are listening will understand exactly what those are, that have left men behind, and they also see what they feel like are um, problematic expressions of masculinity, and women then being forced to pick quote unquote problematic men, or just having an absence, it just being a desert uh for male partner options, and then feeling it kind of incumbent upon them to present either a historic version of masculinity that they believe women um you know deep down biologically desire, um and it maps on very what I see, this instantiation of masculinity, is it maps on very well to the prisoner in Plato's cave being dragged out of the cave. Um, is the and that sounds violent and aggressive, but I think this version of masculinity is. Um, it sees the men's role as one that needs to drag the woman with the wool over her eyes, who doesn't know what she really wants, who is maybe with a man who isn't giving her that, or in a culture that is not giving her the truth, and that it's incumbent upon the man to forcibly remove her from that cave and show her the light. And this is um, it's something that I've seen recently, and it's I think also something that if every man is really honest with themselves, um, they have probably been tempted into before. This sense of calling, of a mission, of very clearly seeing something troubling going on and trying to affect change. Um, but going about it in a way that is forceful, coercive, um, presumptuous, and without the necessary feminine integration of um, what do I want to say? Openness, listening, virtuous passivity, um, warmth, gentleness, um, a comfortability with uncertainty. I think this mode of masculinity is extremely certain. Um, it relies on very clear binaries and black and white distinctions to make sense of to map the territory. Um, and there's a lot of things that I can say about why I think that is or how that may have developed. Um, and I don't really want to focus on that because I could probably talk a lot about that. Um, and I think that would probably be benefited by a lot of conversations with other voices that can help to kind of really draw that out. Um, in this video, I wanted to talk about and propose an alternative vision of masculinity. Um, and for me, I think the critical element that is missing from this expression of masculinity is love and joy. And I want to start with joy because I think it's multifaceted and also misunderstood term. By joy, I don't just mean a fleeting feeling of happiness or ecstasy or something like that, because happiness is contingent on circumstance, and happiness is, um, and because it's contingent on circumstances, it's very fragile. So you can be extremely happy, and then something bad can happen, or circumstances can change, and it can, like that, um, shift. And so joy is much more of an existential stance towards reality that, and C.S. Lewis and many other people talk about this, how joy is inextricably linked to grief. Um, in our grief, we experience the greatest joy. In our joy, we also experience grief. It's one of those paradoxes of reality that in the tension, the greatest and also most resilient and strongest experience is held. And when you are trying to control a circumstance or a person, or you are with absolute certainty trying to, you know, I'm using this word deliberately, penetrate um, reality, you fear something. And the vast majority of the time, it is something that you have not mourned. If you are trying to control um, a woman, for example, it's because you fear losing her and you fear having to surrender and acquiesce to the will of the other person, um, and having to be gentle, which exposes you to the vulnerability that this is another being with um, distinct and ever evolving needs and interests and desires that are different from yours. Um, and men who have not learned how to grieve, uh, and that doesn't just mean, people who have literally passed away in their life. It can mean the ideal of their parents. It can mean the um, status and influence that they desired for themselves. Um, it can merely just mean their own mortality and their own lack of control over the vast, majority of reality. Um, it's hard to explain and it's hard to articulate, but on the other side of that is the greatest experience of joy that you can feel. And no longer are you trying to pick battles with others. No longer are you playing a game of moral superiority and uh, politics and trying to one up other people and trying to own other people. Because you're not obsessed with self-preservation and proving how right you are. Um, I think the greatest atrocities on an individual and on a societal scale have been made by people who are utterly convinced of their certainty. And here's the irony again, is that once you accept that I am not in ultimate control, and the point of life is to not figure out some internally consistent system and project that onto the world, you actually open yourself up to the ultimate sense of certainty. And that is in the beauty and eternal love of my my vocabulary, Christ, and someone else's vocabulary can be something different. And that's what Jesus meant when he was saying, let the dead bury their dead. The dead is the spiritually dead, those who do not follow him. And for them, their concern can be the worldly, earthly affairs of burying their dead. But Christ is about life. Christ is ultimately concerned about life, life as a triumph over death. In my estimation, that is what joy is. The joy is the recognition that life triumphs over death. It's not life while ignoring death or life at the expense of acknowledging death. It is holding the fact of suffering and death as a part of life, but not as the end stop of life. And what I see, again, another irony, is in an attempt to proclaim a new living creed or uh, version of what it means to be a man that is supposed to carry us forward into greater experiences of what it means to be human, ultimately. It is being fueled by ultimately a nihilistic philosophy that life is ultimately meaningless, that joy is not possible, that being a man is about dominating and consuming others and women and um it it does not have the inexhaustible life of the other in its view. It's like a bulldozer plowing through a cemetery. And those are the real dead that are burying the dead. And I think there are people who see connections with the afterlife or connections with spirits um, as melancholic attachment. It's something to get over. There's only an image of someone being hung up on someone who has passed and falling into a pit of despair and depression about that, which is a very real thing. And I would argue that that is a disordered relationship with someone who has passed. That's that's kind of yeah, that is like a melancholic longing for what once was and an inability to accept death and move through it. But the move is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and abandon any sense of a grieving process. Um, because spirits don't just haunt people, they guide people as well. Just think about, you know, two of the most popular movie series of our time, Harry Potter and Star Wars. In Harry Potter, at the end of Harry Potter, when Harry defeats Voldemort in the forest, he has his father, his mother, um, I believe Dumbledore. He has these spirits of these people who have been guiding him throughout the entirety of the series. Um, Spirits who he can call on to make the right decision, to act as if he were them, and people who are really indwelling him. In Star Wars, you have um, Obi-Wan Kenobi sacrificing himself so that he could be risen and be that person, be that guiding force for Luke. Um, at the end, you have Anakin, even though he is, as Darth Vader, the epitome of evil, you have the goodness of him being risen up as someone who Luke can call upon and commune with. Um, and the importance of having guides like this who reveal to us the overwhelmingly true reality that life is eternal. Accepting that fact has massive, massive implications for how we live our life. And I would argue that men today need to experience that. And on the other side of that is true masculinity. Masculinity that cares and wants to create and cultivate life. Because life triumphs over death. No matter how much you want to believe that it doesn't, no matter how much you want to believe that burning down the house is what's needed and what's called for and what a real man does, the house will be rebuilt. And the house will be rebuilt by wise builders, not foolish ones, as Jesus says. Thank you.